Welcome to the Radically Genuine Podcast. I am Dr. Roger McFill, and I'm sitting in a studio today that is about 80 degrees, unfortunately, as our heating system in our building this morning went kaput. So it is a little warm in here, but they're working on it from what I understand. For those who don't know, I write a weekly Substack. You can go to drmcfillin.substack.com, or you can go to drmcfillin.com. You can sign up for free weekly posts. I recently posted an article titled, "I Refuse to Mourn the Death of Our Attention Spans." I spoke about the growing dependence on social media, technology, addiction to the phone, and really how it is shaping our limitations of our focus and attention. And I received a response from our guest today. She stated, "I usually agree with you. The small divergence today comes from a place of seeing ADHD symptoms fall away in kids at the Family Hope Center, where I serve as a medical director and nutrition expert. And yes, they all have prescriptions for limited or no screens, beautiful diets, time outdoors, exercise, reading, and all the other good stuff. But they also have an extensive brain stimulating program that invokes neurons to grow, heal, rewire, and organize, leading to changes in the brainstem that reduce and ultimately eliminate the symptoms we call ADHD for good, without drugs, without Band-Aids." The guest today said she'd love to chat about this because it's true that, as they say, ADHD is incredibly overdiagnosed. It's also true, in her opinion, that some kids and adults, their pons and medulla never developed properly. And we know how to help them develop it, and it changes lives. In my humble opinion, the notion that certain brains don't develop properly, quote unquote, is a problematic oversimplification that fails to address the rich tapestry of human neurodiversity. Our understanding of the brain is still evolving, and ever-growing notions of abnormal development may actually represent natural variations in neurological functioning. These differences often come with unique strengths and abilities that have been crucial to human innovation and progress throughout history. This perspective recognizes that neurological differences are simply part of the normal spectrum of human variation, much like biodiversity in ecosystems. Biological reductionism has turned ADHD into a profitable medical fiction, reducing the complexity of human behavior to a simplistic brain disorder. This myopic view has led to the mass drugging of millions, particularly children, creating a generation dependent on stimulants. By ignoring crucial environmental and social factors, we've pathologized normal variations in attention and activity levels, transforming vibrant, energetic kids into lifelong patients. The result? A society where pill popping is preferable to addressing root causes like educational reform, nutrition, poverty, or even family dynamics. This reductionist approach hasn't just failed to solve the problem of ADHD, it's created a new one. A population convinced they're broken and need chemical fixes to function. The ADHD paradigm fundamentally misunderstands human attention, reducing a complex adaptive system to a supposed deficit. In reality, our attention naturally gravitates towards what's novel, stimulating, and critical in the moment. A trait that's been crucial for human survival and innovation. Labeling someone as disordered simply because they don't attend to what others deem important is a dangerous oversimplification. However, this doesn't mean we're powerless to shape our focus. Thanks to neuroplasticity, we can indeed train our brains to better attend to less stimulating but still important tasks. The key is recognizing this is a skill to be developed, not a disorder to be medicated. By understanding and working with our brain's natural tendencies rather than against them, we can enhance our focus and even transform mundane tasks into more engaging experiences. This approach acknowledges both the validity of diverse attention patterns and our capacity for growth, offering a more nuanced and empowering perspective than the reductionist ADHD model. We are here to discuss this and more today with our return guest, Dr. Kristin Reihman. She's a graduate of Stanford School of Medicine, board-certified family physician. She's renowned as an expert in Lyme disease treatment. She's also the author of Life After Lyme, Revive Your Inner Rock Star and Achieve a Full Recovery. She is also a founding board member of the newly developed Conscious Clinician Collective. Dr. Kristin Reihman, welcome back to the Radically Genuine podcast.
It's fun to be here as always. Thanks for having me back. And as I was listening to that prelude, I agree with every single thing you said, and want to add that I feel like there's another path. This idea that ADHD needs a diagnosis so it can be medicated, so it can be managed. I totally agree with you that that's not the way we want to go. But the idea that if we don't label it or don't acknowledge that something is going on here that isn't working well for people, to me, we have to start somewhere. And what I love about the approach taken at the Family Hope Center is that we help people understand where the glitches are so they can actually rewire them and get to the place where they don't need medication. They don't have to work 10 times as hard as everyone else just to keep on track. And they maintain all of their brilliance. That's the part I want people to walk away with. You don't lose your neurodiversity and your own special brilliance just because suddenly it's easier to function in the world. And that's what I want people to leave understanding.
Okay, so let me get a sense of, how you categorize ADHD. What makes somebody ADHD to you?
So the first thing I want to say is we don't even use that label. At the Family Hope Center, we do not focus on sort of diagnostic criteria because those are not useful to us. Those are things that were developed, as you know, so that people could bill insurance properly and match things up to a drug that was indicated and tested for those problems. So we really try to stay away from those labels. And instead, what we do at the Family Hope Center is we look at the people's abilities and what they're actually able to do. And we chart them in 7 different areas of the brain to determine at what level the brain seems to be struggling. And then we plug in a program. We send people home with a program that they can do on their own to stimulate growth in that particular area of the brain so that they don't just have to, they're no longer working around and navigating the kind of bumps in the road. They're actually smoothing out the road from the ground up.
Okay. So how do you identify that it's a part of the brain that isn't working properly?
So we have what's called an integrated neurological chart, and that chart allows us to measure a variety of things over, again, 7 brain domains over potential seven years of early life. And we match up what a well newborn should be doing on day 1 of life based on their reflexes. If their reflexes are intact, they should have a light reflex when you shine a light in their eyes. Some kids don't have that. If they don't have that, that tells us, wow, there's a problem in the medulla oblongata, which is where that reflex comes out of. We want a kid to be able to have a palmar grasp. When you put something in their hand, they should go like this. They should bring their hand around that object. That's a reflex that's innate and present at birth for neurologically well children. We want to know if this child is well in that area of their brain. We also want to know what happens when they make their own fist. Make a fist right now. Show me your fist, Roger. Turn it towards me so I can see your thumb. That is a well-integrated reflex. When the fist is closed and the thumb is in front like that, that's a window into the medulla oblongata and the pons, the midbrain, that tells us, okay, check that area of the brain is intact. Some kids are doing this. Some kids are doing this. Some kids have their thumb tucked right into their fist. Some kids can't make a full fist. Those are all indications of something amiss at the brainstem level. And by working through a whole progressive chart in this way, you can map out where any individual brain is kind of check, all systems go, and where they're struggling. And then you can plug in a program that helps stimulate development at that level of the brain.
Okay, so this sounds different, though, than how we think about ADHD. So when researchers talk about ADHD as this psychiatric condition, they believe it's associated with weaker function and structure of prefrontal cortex circuits, especially in the right hemisphere, which plays that role in regulating attention, behavior, and emotion.
Right.
You're talking about neurocognitive conditions that can exist across the lifespan, even first day of birth, and measuring that range and seeing where somebody might have profound deficits and what can be done through therapies in order to improve it.
Exactly. So I diverge from that belief about ADHD. And yes, the prefrontal cortex is also responsible for those rule sets and memory and focus and attention, as is the left cerebellum. But deeper than that, if there are issues in the midbrain, this is where we want to focus. Because if the brain gets the signal to grow and heal and organize at the midbrain, it'll continue that process on the way up as soon as the tracks are laid down from below. So it's really a bottoms-up approach that focuses less on figuring out a Band-Aid for the memory, which is the prefrontal cortex issue, and more for how do we reset the stage for the brain to work properly and to grow and heal and organize, which is its natural tendency if there's no obstacles in the way.
Okay. I know that you don't like diagnoses, but you work in a system that requires them. So how would we label an infant, for example, who is unable to make their fist? Like, what would you diagnose that condition as?
So at this stage, there's not, in terms of the medical terminology, there's not a diagnosis for that. And therefore, a lot of these kids get missed. A lot of kids show up to their well child checks at 2 months, at 4 months, at 8 months. And they're told, well, they don't have a social smile yet at 6 weeks, but, we're going to watch and wait. And they're maybe just a little bit slow to develop that. Whereas if we could really understand as a community that this indicates that the limbic brain is not happy, how do we stimulate the limbic brain to grow, heal, and organize? How do we build in beneath that on the midbrain to help the whole thing take off? Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about, because this paradigm is really different, even though as soon as people learn it, they're like, oh my gosh, that's so basic and natural. So when I was delivering babies, which I did a lot before I got Lyme disease, I trained with a bunch of midwives. And one of the things I used to do was watch videos of natural home births and unassisted births, because I wanted to see what normal looked like. I wanted to see what natural was like. And that's sort of my inclination all the time. What are our bodies kind of designed to do? And one of the videos that really stayed with me was this video of a woman whose baby was delivered onto her belly, and then everyone's hands were off that baby. And the baby was naked and mom's belly was bare. And the baby got to use all of its primitive reflexes, which come from the medulla oblongata, the pons, the midbrain, but mostly the medulla, to root around, to move its arms, to start crawling, to dig in its toe with the Babinski reflex, which should be present at birth if the child is neurologically intact. And all of these movements, which are natural and reflex-based, generated the baby's ability to crawl on its belly from lower belly of mom up to her breast, using new reflexes to root around and to find the nipple and latch and suckle. That took about 2 minutes and 39 seconds. If they touched the baby, all that would stop, because you're now going into the baby's cortex and saying, oh, something else is happening here. But if you let the baby live in its midbrain where it wants to live as a newborn, it will run those pathways again and again. And every time it does, those 10 or 12 different reflexes that are getting used when the baby is crawling like that on its belly are sending a message through those nerves back to the midbrain that say grow, heal, organize. It's tonifying or creating the stimulation for neuroplasticity in that area. And that's the baseline. That's the place everybody starts. So we have people who come to the Family Hope Center who are little children, who are babies even, and who normally might be crawling for their chronological age on their belly. And by the way, I should say, we use the word crawling in the way the old neurology textbooks use them, which is on your belly. What you and I might call crawling, we call creeping at the Family Hope Center, just to keep everyone on their toes. So a newborn baby, if you put them flat on their belly on a surface that doesn't have a lot of obstacles, they will use their reflexes to crawl across the room. And if the baby can't, because one of those reflexes or more are not functioning properly, the answer isn't to watch and wait and see. The answer is more crawling on the belly with assistance until that brain gets the message to grow and heal and organize. And so even adults can do this because every brain is wired the same way. And that's the message of neuroplasticity that works to heal the brain.